Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spill the Tea in 10, where we talk about how to make your proficiency-oriented classroom a lot more practical. We are going to be discussing today tips and questions and answers that were submitted from you, from the audience. And this question is a really good one, so stick around. Today, we're talking about what to do if you have faced these two difficulties that are really, really common in the world language teaching space. Number one, what do you do if you struggle with being the only teacher in your department of 5, 10, 15, whatever it might be, that's not using direct grammar instruction, and you're trying to move in whatever pace it might be towards more proficiency oriented practice? What do you do if you're the only one? And the second one is, what do you do if your colleagues just really don't seem interested, but you know that that's direction that everything is going in? Maybe it's a district initiative, or maybe it's your curriculum, whatever it might be. Either way, there's friction. So let's talk about it. I really see this one. These two difficulties that were submitted by different teachers, I feel like they have a lot in common, and that is I'm not on the same page as my colleagues. And that happens a lot in teaching, in life, in anything. And it comes down to this. When it comes to proficiency-oriented practice, rooted in comprehensible input, you and I both know, because you are here, that this is best practice, proven by research, yada, yada, yada. I won't bore you with the details. You're here, so you already know. However, teaching is an incredibly difficult job, and it demands so much more than rifling through research papers, right? And the environment that world language teaching has come up in, which is an entirely different topic that we don't have 10 minutes to discuss today, has created an environment where we rely heavily on direct grammar instruction. It's part of the history of how we've done things for a long time. It's how many people were taught and many people believe is good enough for other people. You'll also find that a lot of stakeholders, parents and administrators, you name it, honestly expect it. So it's a common obstacle that people face. So let's figure out how we can get past this. My first piece of advice would be to you that, number one, don't worry about it. It's not your problem. It's really not your job to get everybody on the same page. It is your job to serve your students in the best way possible in the time that you have with them and the energy that you have. And that energy is very limited, which is why it's really important that we talk about this. How much of your energy is this task taking up of trying to recruit your colleagues to one side or the other? Because think about that statement, right? Like, that's not where any of us need to be. The whole point of teaching is that we are all working towards the same goal. And that is to help foster a more well-equipped generation that is happier, healthier, wealthier, all of the good things, that feel more welcomed in the world. And we feel that we can do that through world language. However, not everybody sees it as happening the same way. And that's for a lot of reasons that are frankly beyond your control right now. So invite them to come to the next Practical and Comprehensible, and we'll talk about all of the research-based reasons there, but it's not your job as a teacher within their department that has to work with them every day to try and convince them. Pick your battles. This is not one of them. However, if you find yourself in the position where maybe you're an administrator and you're in a position as a department head where you know that, like, this is the way things are moving and some people are dragging their wagon and holding things back in your department, this is what I would do. And I find that this is a really effective approach. Somebody actually in the Practical Proficiency membership that I run with other like-minded teachers who want the same outcomes for their classroom but want a jumpstart approach to it, they were talking about the same topic. And this is what one very wise teacher mentioned, is that she's in the same boat, but her approach to it is this, that they use the same textbook as an anchor point for collecting the same content. And what she has done is remove certain pieces of the content, as well as followed things in a different order to be more proficiency oriented, and has advocated for different activities. not necessarily using the name or the topic or the title. This is more CI. This is more proficiency oriented. Insert term here. It's a great idea. It's all about delivery, because you and I know that proficiency is simply synonymous with best practice. So just use best practice. Just use best practice. And if you need to push some changes, we'll call them, then go along the lines of putting it in a little bit of a disguise, if you will. Something like, hey, this is just an activity that worked really well in my classroom. You want to try it? Like, you don't have to go on this whole spiel about like how it's works better for this reason and this reason and this reason. Just say, it worked really well in my classroom. You interested in trying it? Or this is the new curriculum that we have, and this is what we're rolling with. That's the end of the story. And in this whole idea of we're going to make these changes, but we're not really going to do a lot of broker you to my side in order to make that happen. The power behind this is you're no longer creating sides, because teachers are all on the same side. We're all in the same struggles together. We might just have differing opinions on how to get there in the world language sphere. And dividing people is not by any means going to get anybody on anybody's side at the end of the day. It's a really good time for us to leave behind the old divisions of traditional legacy teacher, grammar-based teacher, blah, 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 and proficiency-oriented teacher. Because guess what? That division doesn't really exist. We've made it up. I can't even tell you, in all of my years of consulting, of working one-on-one with teachers, of supporting them in memberships and conferences, blah, 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 you name it, that no teacher really feels like they're completely one side or the other. Everybody is working with the legacy grammar-based materials that we have and trying to move more in this direction. So everybody's on a pathway. Some people might be back here, and other people might be a little bit further along, but we're all on the same pathway. Some people might take diversions too, but we're all on the same pathway. So let's support each other. What does that look like? It looks like if you have a team of 8 colleagues who are asking constantly for activities from you, and then they get upset when it doesn't look like the activities that you're doing in your classroom, guard your energy, and your simple response can be, this is what works really well for my students. I invite you at any time to come see what it looks like and how much fun we have in class. That's it. End of the speech. Like, you don't need anything else. Like, you really don't need to, like, they get enough of that in like really poorly organized PD, right? Of like, this is the research, this is why you should do it, blah, blah, blah. Nobody needs that. This is why I do what I do in my classroom. It's really fun. I invite you to come check it out anytime that you would like to. And if you like some of these activities, go for it. And when the time does come where there is a little bit of a fork in the road and you have to advocate one way or the other because you know, like, oh, this path is not going to work. Like, this is not going to fly for me. What's that thing that we always tell other people to do? Just shut your door and teach. You can do the same thing within your department. Just make sure that you are choosing those shut your door and teach moments in ways that do not create waves or problems for you, for people that you are on the same team with. For example, if there is a district-wide assessment, that's not the time. That's not the time to change things. You can go to the district and talk about how next year we need to work towards making this more best practice, quote unquote, or proficiency oriented, however you want to frame it. But with your colleagues today, right now, make all of the choices available to you work for your classroom. Proficiency oriented as much as possible. Eliminating unnecessary quizzes and then changing around those quizzes and tests and any kind of assessments to being more proficiency aligned. But when it comes to things that you know that are going to cause a lot of havoc for your department, like, that's not the time to like put your stake in the ground. It's really not, because you will do a lot more harm than good that way for the next year's worth of students that is coming up, because you're going to create a whole battle that's really unnecessary because you're creating a lot of extra work for them. So evaluate and use your good teacher judgment that I know you have, because you make more decisions than a brain surgeon every day. With my colleagues, which decisions will make the most impact with my students and which ones can wait for next year? Which ones are going to really tip the scales for students this year, and which ones do I really, really care about that preserve the integrity of my community in my classroom, and which ones are curriculum things that I know are going to take 5 years to take in effect anyways, and we shouldn't be hashing this out at every department meeting. Let's save that topic for next year. I hope this helps to clarify when you are running into those like those moments of friction really often when it comes into that. To give you a little bit of background for my version of this is I was the first teacher in a large department to start doing proficiency-oriented practice. I was really into it, thought that everybody should get on board with it, and did a whole presentation about it, presented in the district, all that kind of stuff. And like, oh, here's where I am today. People were very receptive to it and they loved it. But here's what the response I got at the end of the day was most of the time: this is a great idea, but I already have all of my own materials. And, like this job is already so much work. So I'm not going to recreate the wheel. That makes so much sense to me. Of course, like if you've been teaching for a long time and you already have something that you're really happy with, so have empathy for the people around you and for the decisions that they choose to make. And as well as for me, when I was put in a position of leadership of other teachers, I made everything in a proficiency-oriented direction, and then there were some teachers who were not happy with that direction. And so I said to them, these are the materials that are available to you and that I have made for you. If you would like to go in a different direction with your classroom, fully respect that, but you'll have to find those materials elsewhere. You'll have to source them from elsewhere. They're not going to be provided by this cohort, this PLC, blah, 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 all that good stuff. So you might be on either one side or the other of that. But that is a good way to make it very clear that I respect what's happening in your classroom, but you also need to respect what's happening in mine. And that still keeps relationships very peaceful with colleagues and makes it very clear that everybody's still on the same side and that you respect everybody's wish to want autonomy in their classroom, because you and I both know that we don't get enough of it. So our colleagues should not be the source of that. This has been some tips on how you can handle that like ever-present weird struggle that we have in world language of differing philosophies on how to teach world language. But I would argue that it's not so much differing philosophies as it is we're all going in that direction because we know it's best practice. It's been proven time and time again. But because of historical factors, this is what we're used to. And this is how so many people have been taught and what so many people want to see from us, that it can be hard to let go of. Plus, there's a lot of materials for it. So don't hate if that's what other people are doing. We are on a continuum. Some people are here. You might be over here. And then other people are over here. So nobody on this pathway should be looking at this incredibly difficult uphill pathway that we have as teachers and be giving each other gripes about it. We're all on a very difficult pathway. So lend a hand when possible, help lift people up over those difficult parts of that pathway, but creating divisions is the opposite of what we want, because we're all working towards the same goal. Thanks so much for being here. And we do this every Wednesday. So come hang out at 4 p.m. I am Devin of La Libre Language Learning, and you can get tips like this every week if you are into this. So if you are on that comprehensible input train, trying to figure out how to make proficiency work for you in a way that does not take away from your life outside of school, this is the spot for you. All right, I will see you next week. Bye for now.